Very welcome to our webinar here this evening on inclusive practices in physical education. It is just 4:59 right now, so we'll aim to get started at 5 and just give our colleagues a chance to get logged in. Each member here this evening that if you have a useful resource that has been relevant to learning that we're speaking about this evening in your own context, that it's a really nice practice to perhaps share that in the Padlet page. You'll see that on the right hand column already one resource has been shared. So it's just an area that we can collaborate and reflect and come back to at any point. There's a couple of different ways that you can access the Padlet. So if you're working off one device, probably the easiest thing is to go to the chat where my colleague Lisa has put the link to the Padlet page in. So you might go to your chat page and click on that link and just make sure it brings you into our Padlet space. Another way is if you have a second device, if you have a phone close to hand, you can use the QR code on the screen in front of you to use a QR reader app, or I think if you have an iPhone, you can just use the actual camera to take a picture of the QR code and that'll bring you straight into our Padlet space. And for those of you who maybe are not as familiar with the Zoom platform, although some of us are zoomed out at this stage, when you join a Zoom, the previous chat is not available to you. So we'll be adding this link into the chat a number of times this evening. So you might wonder if you've been here from the very beginning, why do we keep on adding the link in? And that's just for people who have gotten knocked out of the chat or who weren't with us from the start. So we're going to be getting contributions this evening from 4 participants. Myself, my name is Anya Farley. I am a JCT advisor with the Junior Cycle Implementation Support with responsibility for physical education. I've only very recently joined the full-time team, so I'm new to this role. Previously, up until the end of May, I was working for the past 12 years in St. Bricken's College in West Cavan, which is a small, rural, co-educational post-primary school under the Cavan and Monaghan Education and Training Board. We have 2 special classes, so a very inclusive ethos, and that's definitely something that I brought from my school into my work with the JCT, and it'll be evident throughout the course of this evening, I would imagine, the ethos of the school that I come from. We also have contribution from Alicia Foy, who we will hear from in a while. Alicia is on the full-time team with the L1 LPs and the L2 LPs. We have David Gannon, a teacher of physical education and also a JCT associate advisor who teaches in Manscoil Garman in Escorthy, County Wexford. And we have Mary Smith, who's joining us from County Waterford. Mary is also a practicing physical education teacher and she teaches across 2 special schools in County Waterford. So that is St. Joseph's Special School and St. Martin's Special School. So we're very, very grateful to all our contributors this evening and we look forward to hearing from them later in this event. So we're going to move to our Padlet page now for the first time this evening. And I suppose the purpose of this activity is just to get us used to using the Padlet and also to start planting those seeds of ideas that we're thinking, what we're coming into this evening with. So I want you to think for a moment about the strengths of your own independent practice or perhaps your PE department's collaborative practice in relation to inclusion in physical education. So Lisa's going to put the link into the chat now, so you can navigate it through the link in the chat or via the QR code that's on the screen. So we'd just like to take a moment to move over to the Padlet page, and on activity 1, we might take about 60 seconds just to jot in any idea that comes to mind that is a strength of either your own personal practice or your collaborative practice in physical education relating to inclusion. Okay, So lots of lovely ideas coming in already on the Padlet page. We're not going to visit it just right now, but we will visit the ideas that come through from the Padlet page after we complete activity 2. So lots of lovely ideas coming in there on the strengths of people's collaborative practice in this space. So that brings us along nicely to our rationale for this evening's webinar, why we have decided that this is a relevant area of learning for physical education teachers at this time. Well, first of all, it came up quite strongly in our feedback from our cluster CPD events that teachers have an interest in this area and are looking to broaden their knowledge in inclusive practices. That's also grounded in our principles, I suppose, of junior cycle. So taking our minds back to the 8 principles of junior cycle, and you don't need me to go through all 8 principles with you. You've probably seen these before from either reading the specifications or in your own whole school days. But you remember that one of these principles is inclusive education. And that is telling us that the educational experience is inclusive of all students and contributes to equality of opportunity, participation, and outcomes for all. So inclusion isn't just referring to one specific group, okay? It's obviously looking at all students, and that's quite evident for us in the definition that we have of inclusive education. We also see here on our screens a quote taken from the Framework for Junior Cycle. So this is one of our core leading documents in junior cycle education that we always come back to, the Framework for Junior Cycle, published in 2015. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and allow you an opportunity just to read through this and make sense of it within your own context. And it's the second half of this quote that's most pertinent for us in the context of this evening's webinar. So that is ensuring that the learning opportunities are as accessible as possible to students with special educational needs, and that the statements about the skills are to be developed and articulated in a way that reflects this. So that accessibility is coming in quite strong on this quote that we see here, taken straight from the framework, as you can see on page 36. I think it would be remiss of us at any event that is related to inclusion not to mention our Education of the Person with Special Education Needs Act. So that's it's commonly referred to as EPSN. So EPSN in 2004 is a very important piece of legislation that was stating that the provision of education for people with special educational needs in an inclusive environment alongside those who do not have such needs. So I suppose the reality of where we've seen this is in our day-to-day lives or in our society has probably been in the opening of special classes in mainstream schools at both primary and post-primary level. Probably more common at primary level, where a number of special classes would have opened in recent years. But as those students progress through that eight-year journey at primary, when they come to post-primary level, quite often there is a demand now for that special class model to follow through for the post-primary level also. It's important to note that not all aspects of EPSN have been fully enacted due to a variety of reasons that we won't solve this evening, but political, socioeconomic, etc. But it is a really important piece of legislation for us, because prior to the EPSN Act, I suppose inclusion was kind of more done as a goodwill gesture, and it was done kind of coming from a moral stand ground, whereas post-EPSN, we see that there is a legislative obligation to enact inclusion in our educational settings. So I suppose I strongly would note that anybody who has signed up for a webinar this evening entitled Inclusive Practices in Physical Education is already engaged in this area of learning and interested in it, and more than likely coming at that from a place of goodwill and a moral grounding of knowing it's the right thing to do. But there also is that legislative piece that goes alongside that. So we're not just doing it because we know it's the right thing to do. We also have that legislative obligation in the background also. So that's something that I think is worth noting. Now, like any good junior cycle event, we have our learning intention for this evening, and that is to explore the links between the Level 2 programme and implementation of the Level 3 physical education. So as you've seen from our couple of definitions previously, inclusion is very broad. And if we were to cover all aspects of inclusion, we would probably be here for days and weeks. But for the purpose of this evening's webinar, within the 90-minute context of that, we're just going to look at one quite specific aspect, and that is the Level 2 learning programme and the implementation of the Level 3 physical education. So these are the group of students that we're looking at. But where does that sit within junior cycles? So we can see here we have the National Framework of Qualifications and subject specifications, which is our Level 3 short course. They're broadly aligned here at Level 3 within the Level 1 to 10 framework. So Level 2 are our L2 LPs, and Level 1 is, for example, our L1 LPs. So our Level 1 knowledge base is quite narrow. Level 2 is more elementary, and Level 3 is a broader skills and knowledge base that's coming through from that piece. And so that's kind of just sitting it in the context of the national framework. It's important that students learn at a level that's appropriate to their needs, but they're also challenged to reach their full potential. And that is certainly something that PE can lend itself towards quite well. So our subject specifications broadly aligned to Level 2, L2 LPs at level, subject specifications at Level 3, L2 LPs at Level 2, and L1 LPs at Level 1. So before we hear from Alicia, who is our expert in the area of the Level 1 and Level 2, we're going to navigate to our Padlet for the second time this evening. And this time we're posing the question of what have you identified in your own practice that would enhance and support inclusion. So you can use the link that's gone into the chat there again one more time, thank you Lisa, and think about what you've identified that enhances practice to support inclusion, and just think about your own context here. So if I was casting my mind back to, just a couple of months ago in St. Perkins College, I might be thinking about, our special class model, our integration into mainstream, the programs that we offered, the student-centred approach. But I'd be really interested to see what comes forward on the Padlet from your own ideas. And we'll just share the Padlet now to gather a couple of these ideas and just contextualise them for the evening. Okay. Peer teaching, integration of additional needs, department students into mainstream classes, modified games and activities, brilliant. Adapted equipment, we're going to be talking about that later, it's great. Rich tasks with layers of involvement, super. Peer teaching, co-teaching, understanding the IEPs. Okay, so taking that time to really look at the planning. A buddy system, I love that idea, that's excellent. Setting high expectations for all students, and whoever has wrote that in, these are anonymous, so I don't have any names to go alongside them, but I know that whoever has included the setting high expectations for all students, that's going to be really strong when we take our teacher testimony later from both Mary and from David. So that piece of high expectations. The UDL approach being inclusive for all. And then I'm just looking at the strengths here. So in our strengths, we looked at equipment, differentiation, local sports partnerships. That's great. Mary's going to speak about the local sports partnerships, differentiation. Okay, that's great. So I think we've lots of ideas on that seed wall coming through there, our cross-curricular links and so on and so forth. So now we are just going to go back to this piece. Sorry. Okay, great. So thank you so much for sharing those ideas, and keep feeling free to add to the Padlet as we move through the course of the evening. So next up, we're going to hear from Alicia, and Alicia has worked in the area of special and inclusive education across a variety of settings for the past number of years, mainstream schools with special classes, special schools. She had a role in the NCSE previously and in a lecturing capacity. So we're very lucky to have Alicia's expertise with us this evening, and she currently is in a full-time role in the JCT on the Level 1, Level 2 learning programmes team. Alicia had hoped to join us here live this evening as a panellist, but she was suffering from a very poor illness in her throat, so she was afraid that her voice might go, so she kindly pre-recorded her piece, so it's available for us to watch now. So we're going to navigate towards that and listen to Alicia speak for the next maybe 6 or 7 minutes on what are the L1 LPs, what are the L2 LPs, and where do they fit in with our programme.
Hi everybody. As Anya mentioned, my name is Alicia, and I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of the Level 1 and Level 2 learning programmes. I'm sure some of you know a lot about them and have already been teaching them, whereas others may not have had that opportunity yet. So the Level 1 and Level 2 learning programmes are 3-year junior cycle programmes, similar to your mainstream subjects. They have 2 short courses aligned with each Level 1 and Level 2 course that you're following, and they have they're divided into priority learning units, 6 priority learning units for Level 1 and 5 priority learning units for Level 2 learning programs. So the Level 1 learning programs are designed for pupils who have a general learning disability, which falls in the low, moderate to severe, profound IQ range. And the Level 2 learning programs are for students who have a diagnosis of a general learning disability, which would be in the high functioning moderate to low functioning mild IQ range. So the Level 1 learning program are for students who would be cognitively functioning at a lower level than their peers, and they may be cognitively delayed compared to their peer group. Those following the Level 2 learning programs are following it because they would not be able to access some or all of the subjects or short courses at Level 3 due to their diagnosis of a general learning disability. Each of these students, the decision to follow these courses for these students will be taken with perhaps the student themselves, their parents, school professionals and external professionals as well. And each of these students would have their own individual education student support plus plan or education plan that would be targeted to meet their specific needs. Both of these programs focus on basic level of literacy, numeracy, language communication, leisure skills, mobility, coordination, social skills, and personal development skills. The Level 1 learning program has a progression pathway. So for each learning outcome, there are 7 steps on the progression pathway due to the variety of abilities and skills and strengths of each of these students. They may be at the very beginning stage of that pathway, which is experiencing a learning outcome, all the way through to generalizing a learning outcome where they've mastered that particular learning outcome. And each of these programs would be each of the students following these programs would be awarded the junior cycle profile of achievement for these in line with their peers. So when I say that these students have a general learning disability, I'm just going to briefly, very quickly explain what that is. So if you look at this graph, I'm just going to pop up my circles here. So the middle circle around the 68%, that is your average IQ. So the average IQ is 100, And then there's slight deviations obviously up and down for that. So an IQ between 85 and 115 is considered within the average range. The low average range then is on the left-hand side, that 14%, that's between 70 and 85. And then the high average IQ then is between 115 and 130. So if you look at that big circle in the middle with the 96%, 96% of the population will have an IQ range between 70 and 130. So the vast majority, if you pick 100 people or 100 children of any particular age, 96% of them will have an IQ between 130 and 70. Then either side of that, you've got your deviations for exceptionally high on the right-hand side. Over 130 of an IQ would be an exceptionally gifted IQ range. And then on the left-hand side, below 70 then would be in the general disability range. So mild general learning disability is between 50 and 69. A moderate general learning disability is between 35 and 49. A severe general learning disability is between 20 and 34. And a profound general learning disability range of IQ would be below 20. So for our students, those following the level 2 learning program would have an IQ range between the low mild, so that would be somewhere in the 50s up to about 60, and high moderate, so between maybe 42 or 43 up to about 60. Those then following the level 1 learning program would have an IQ of below 42 or 43. So the level 1 learning program, as I said, is divided into 6 priority learning units. And one of those priority learning units is PE. So it's very obvious where the cross-curricular links are. That PE priority learning unit then is divided up into 4 elements. So those elements are movement skills, which would be athletics and gymnastics, cooperative activities, which would be games, creative movements, which would be dance, and aquatics, which is obviously anything got to do with water and water sports and swimming. They would be very much tailored to the abilities of the students who will be following that course. They'd be very tailored and very targeted. Because like I mentioned earlier on, that progression pathway, the student may be on various different points of that in different skills. And also some of the students who will be following this, this learning program may not have the full range of mobility. So they may have some limited mobility. So again, it would be very targeted, it would be very specialized and very individual to that particular pupil. The level 2 learning program then, as I said, is made up of 5 PLUs. So communicating and literacy, numeracy, personal care, living in the community, and preparing for work. So as I've said, you can see there it doesn't have a PE specific PLU, but the PE is incorporated into numerous different PLUs. It's particularly obvious its correlation with the personal care. So the element of developing a healthy lifestyle, you can see the learning outcomes for that are very similar to some of the learning outcomes that you would have in the PE short course. But then it would also be across all the different PLUs, you would see strands of the learning outcomes from your PE short course. So it's very easy to see where the correlations are. We are in the process of designing a document with the cross-curricular links between the PE short course and the level 2 learning programs. And so hopefully that will be available soon and you will be able to use that then within your settings. Thank you.
And thank you so much to Alicia for sharing her knowledge and expertise in this area with us. And I think that's a really comprehensive overview of the L1LP and the L2LP that she's given us here. So over the course of the session this evening, we are going to look at how physical education can contribute to the valuable learning within these PLUs for students who are following a level 2 learning program. Now, this is a very specific group of students and, you know, obviously Alicia has alluded to that earlier. So as you know, there's a number of curricular options at present for physical education at Junior Cycle. The slide that you see on the screen before you is more than likely a very familiar slide for anybody who has engaged in our cluster CPD events over the past number of years. So there are 4 curricular options at present for physical education at junior cycle, with a very exciting development at current time, which is the 135-hour specification for physical education, which is currently in development for the NCCA, but it is not ready at the moment. Okay, so we're looking at September 2022 for that specification. But for the purpose of this evening's session, we are going to refer only to the outcomes within the NCCA developed short course at junior cycle in physical education, and how the learning outcomes within this relate to the priority learning units. However, a lot of what we discuss, even though it's taken from the short course, it will certainly have correlations from the other 3 curricular options that are available. So when we're looking at that short course in physical education, we're looking at how specifically the learning aligns from the physical education short course designed by the NCCA with our L2 LP. So I'm going to draw on a little bit of my own personal experience here, my own context, where I would have been a mainstream school with 2 special classes, and we would quite often have students who are following the L2 LP in our special class, which in our context we call it the green room. So our green room is our level 2 learners. So they would often be in mainstream PE, for example, okay? So when I would have been planning for this from the very beginning, a number of years back, I would have sat down with my 2 specifications, with my short course physical education specification, which we were following with our mainstream students at level 3. And I also would have sat down with our level 2 PLUs, and I would have kind of said, okay, what learning here will align? So if I look at, say, certain PLUs and certain learning outcomes, so at the top of the slide, we have our level 3 learning outcomes. So this one in particular, using a range of measurement techniques to monitor and analyze physical activity across a sustained period of time. That really nicely and really neatly aligns for us with the PLU 3.14 and maybe even 3.17. So identifying benefits of regular exercise, maintaining an exercise routine. So in the mainstream classroom, I am planned to include learners of all abilities. So when planning for the learning for the student following the level 2 learning program, I saw that many of the outcomes for the personal care PLU could be explored while their classmates were engaging in the learning outcomes related to physical activity for health and well-being, or strand 1. So therefore, it was possible that all could be included in the same class, with differences in relation to the learning focus and with regard to the breadth and range of knowledge and skill. So in essence, students were following a level 2 learning program, and they were capable of undertaking their learning within a mainstream class, with students undertaking the level 3 curriculum. And I feel very strongly that all students reap the benefit of interacting in this social environment. It wasn't just beneficial for our level 2 students coming into level 3. I really feel that our level 3 students reap the benefits of this also. So before we hear from David and get some testimony from his personal experience, we're just going to navigate to the Padlet one more time. So activity 3 is now asking us to reflect for a moment on how planning might support effective inclusion. And we will take feedback from the Padlet later this evening. But just for a moment, if you might go to the chat and click the link, or else use your phone if you have a phone available to you, and just take a picture or go into the QR code reader app and navigate to activity 3 and have a little think personally in your own practice, or maybe based on what you heard so far this evening, how might planning support effective inclusion in physical education? Just pause for a moment while we add some of those to the chat. Okay. Now, I can see there's lots of lovely ideas coming in already on the Padlet, and thank you for that. I'm not actually going to take that feedback right now, but we will definitely look to that later in our session this evening. So thank you so much to everybody for participating in these activities. It really helps with our collegiality and with us working together on this. So now we're going to hear from David Gannon. David is a JCT associate for physical education and also a physical education teacher in Manschool Garman in Escorthy, County Wexford. I apologise profusely to all the Gaeilgeoirs for my poor pronunciation there, but I hope I got it okay. So David is going to speak a little bit about his own experience in this area. So if I'd ask David to maybe unmute, that would be great. And he will talk you through first of all.
How are you doing, everybody? My name is David Gannon. As we've mentioned, I'm a JCT associate, and a couple of years ago I was an associate advisor, which meant I had a day a week where I seconded to JCT, and part of my role was actually working in this area. And there's a few reasons why I was picked to work in this area, so I'll kind of go through those ones. So as you can see on the slide there, the first one is I've coached with Special Olympics for the last 10 years or so, and what Special Olympics has taught me and what I've learned is mainly its motto, you know, a place for everyone, that we celebrate achievement at a variety of different levels, and that's really important. Also, I've completed the graduate diploma in special and inclusive education, so that was a couple of years part-time, and I'm sure many people here have undertaken part of that course or all of that course, and it allowed me to develop an ideology. And like, my personal ideology towards inclusion is that inclusion is fundamentally a mindset. It will throw up lots and lots of difficulties, but if we follow solution-focused thinking as opposed to problem-focused thinking, we'll come around to some very good solutions, and we'll be able to articulate the problems that we have and be able to advocate for our students in our classes. And then the last point is a personal interest in the topic. So my son is 2.5 years old. My son Aidan was born with Down syndrome. He's an absolutely amazing little person. And when he gets to secondary school, he may follow a level 2 learning program. And she has just completed her Leaving Cert applied, and she went the whole way through secondary school at mainstream level. So really, inclusion, fundamentally believe that it's kind of within us, and that if we change our mindset, we'll get towards it. So the second slide then was some of the challenges and potential barriers that we may have. And I was thinking about potential barriers that I kind of thought, in the school where I work, were my son coming to this school, what challenges would arise? And so the first one would be that you'd have institutional challenges. And I think most teachers will have heard in their school a statement along the lines of, this is for this person, or we can't support them, or they would be better off going to the school around the corner, or whatever it is. And that comes from somewhere, and that maybe comes from barriers that people perceive are in the institution, physical barriers or barriers within the individuals. And kind of let me know is that as individuals, we often have fear of the unknown, something that is totally different, and that we're just thrown into the deep end. And oh my God, there's a person arriving in and they're following a level 2 learning program, and I have no idea what to do, and they're coming into first year and I haven't a clue. So that we kind of felt that individuals might feel that they didn't have the skills. And that leads us on to the training, where a lot of the issues in the PE course are practical issues as opposed to general issues. And that means that CPD is quite difficult to find the thing that's going to help you with the specific problem that is arising in this area, or the specific difficulty that's arising in the area. And then again, because we have such a broad spectrum of people for undertaking a level 2 learning program, that resources are difficult. And I teach in a Gael school, so less accessible as Gael than as Berla. But that's why I've just come up with a shared resource that was mentioned earlier on. Eilish mentioned it earlier on about a shared resource that we were going to do. So if you want to flick on to the next. Now, so this is a template that is available on the JCT website, and this is available to all subjects, and it's your priority learning units at the Level 2 learning program and Level 2 learning outcomes. And then what I have done is, as Anya spoke about earlier on, and as Alicia mentioned earlier on, is started to map where areas in the PE short course will map onto Level 2 learning outcomes. So we've gone through all the short course, and we've gone through all the priority learning units, and we've mapped as many as we feel are appropriate. Now, this is a very broad area, and not everything on this form will work or be appropriate for every single student or every single Level 2 learning program. But the idea was that we would give some people, as I was speaking before, of like, I don't know where to start, that we would give people a basis of a start and an idea, and where can we go from here. So I just wanted to draw your attention to the bottom one, is like using creative arts and the focus on the expressive arts and the link to gymnastics and dance. And this brings me back to my Special Olympics training and what I've done with Special Olympics. So you will see that people are asked to create a dance and perform a dance, and in the PE cycle short course, and then they're asked to use drama, or they're asked to use a piece of work for display, or participate in a performance or celebration. So from my interactions with Special Olympics, I kind of came up with some ideas that would really work in a practical situation in the classroom. So the fourth slide then is, this is Special Olympics .org, or .org, sorry, that's the Gaeilge coming out again, specialolympics.org, and you can see they have a variety of different sports available. I think there's 26 sports altogether. We offer 15 in Ireland between Winter Games and World Games, and obviously your different clubs will offer different sports. So my club, the Wexford Club, we offer gymnastics as one of ours. So you will find that there's artistic gymnastics and there's rhythmic gymnastics. And if you click on this resource, it will bring you to artistic level A or B or C or level 1 or 2 or 3. And it's possible to do that with rhythmic, with a ball or a ribbon or a hoop. And it allows pupils and athletes to show what they're learning extracurricular in the classroom, which is a huge thing that maybe we don't consider as much when we're teaching students with additional needs, is that if we have a very good soccer player in our classroom, we might ask them to demonstrate. If we know a person is performing in the Special Olympics World Games or the regional games or the national games, and they've been practicing their gymnastics routine for the last year and a half, they usually have it down to a T. It is amazing what these people can do and what they achieve. And that showing other students in the class a demonstration of what achievements can be done will really enhance the learning for everybody in the class, not just the students with following a Level 2 learning program. So that's it. We'll move on then, Anya, unless there's questions for me.
I don't think we'll just pause for questions at this time, but David, thank you so much for your time this evening and for sharing those resources with us. And we might maybe if you're available to stay with us, David, we might hold on to the very end, and if there's any questions that we have, then we might be able to be in a position to answer some of them. But I really advise everybody to have a look at this gymnastics resource, because I'll be completely honest, I didn't know about it until David highlighted it to me recently, and it really is just absolutely fabulous. And as David said, it's a really strong piece to take what the students who are perhaps following a Level 2 learning program, what they might be doing outside of school extracurricularly, and take their strengths from there, and instead of trying to adapt our classroom to fit them, let's celebrate that and make that the main focus of learning for everybody in the class, so they can share their learning. So look, we've had a lot of input there from both Alicia and David, and a small bit from myself as well. So if we would just like to maybe pause for a moment and just capture personally, if you have a Post-it or a pen and paper close to hand, maybe just pause for reflection. And if you have any ideas or questions, maybe just put those, down, put pen to paper, think about it, because sometimes this pause for reflection, we can just give us a moment to contextualize what we've heard. So I'm just going to stop speaking for about 60 seconds now to give us a moment to just reflect on what we've heard from David and Alicia so far. Okay, so while we are just kind of wrapping up that moment of reflection, I'm going to introduce you to our colleague Mary Smith. So Mary is coming to us via Zoom in County Waterford. Mary is a physical education teacher across 2 special schools. So she has expertise from St. Joseph's Special School in Waterford and also St. Martin's Special School. So I'm going to just ask, perhaps if everybody else is muted, that would be great. And we'll ask Mary perhaps to unmute. And so if Mary is able to join us, that would be super.
Yeah.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, can you see me?
I think we can, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Mary, and I've been teaching special needs for over 20 years now. I work between 2 schools, St. Martin's Special School, which is moderate to profound, and there we work on the level 1 learning program. And in St. Joseph's, it's a mile school, and we work on the level 2 program. We do the PE short course, and we do the JCSP, which is the Junior Cert Schools program, and that complements the L2 LP very good. In St. Joseph's, we have relatively small classes. So we would possibly have 8 to 11 pupils in a class. You might say that's very, very small, but a small number, but in fact, it's not. It's just a perfect number because we have a diverse group of pupils with diverse needs. And it can be very challenging at times. However, I'm very lucky because over the years, I've always been able to organize my classes in accordance to ability. And by doing that, it has never highlighted their disability. But because of COVID, we've all had been put into pods and bubbles. And because of that, I have had to work within the class. So I'm working at the moment. I could have a visually impaired child plus somebody in a wheelchair, some other person with challenging behavior, and it's quite difficult, but we have to continue and adapt accordingly. So because of that, I can honestly put my hand up and say that I don't feel I'm meeting their needs from a point of view of the higher achievers to the low achievers, because we're such a broad mix at the moment. Our schools have great links with external agencies and local facilities. We're very involved with the sports partnership. And every year they come in and they offer us different programs and different activities, which we've always taken up on. And the FAI and the GAA, they regularly organise 6-week programs for our schools. The Munster Rugby are fantastic, and we regularly do tag rugby sessions with them. Now, what I loved about Munster Rugby was when they first came into our school, I was out in the yard with them, and we were doing the rugby, and all of a sudden I was watching, and they were just letting them throw the ball forward, side, whatever. And I said, I've been trying to teach them the proper way, to the side and back. At these, no, Mary, keep it flowing, keep it flowing. And so I've learned something from that, and that's worked great. The Munster Special Schools Council, they unite all special schools in Munster. And every year we have a swimming gala in Cork, and we have an athletics event in the CIT. Going forward, this is going to be very good, because with our CBAs, we will be able to link them in with the aquatics and with the athletics. And currently I have a few pupils who are working on shot put in their CBA. And I'm hoping that next May, we may get back to going down to Cork to participate in an athletics event. And that will tick a lot of boxes for us. We often link up with, we often link up with other secondary schools, and in particular the transition year students. Now, I haven't done that for a while, but it has been fantastic. The last one I did was with the Ursuline School, and the transition year students came over, and with a few of my pupils, we had a pitching with golf and a little competition between, they all buddied up. And it was very successful. And going forward, I think I'd like to do that again. And I think from a point of view from transition students, it's fantastic for them. And for our students, it's wonderful. So that's about it from me.
Thank you, Mary, so much for sharing your experience and your honest reflections on how the last year has been for you. And it sounds like certainly a difficult situation in working in the pods and bubbles, but it really is phenomenal, the ways that you have worked around that and overcome it. And I think what really stood out for me from chatting with Mary was how she is using the pre-existing, I suppose, events that were happening and aligning these with a CBA moment. Okay, so when she's preparing for her athletics event in CIT, she's saying, okay, well, we're doing our unit of learning on athletics here now, and our CBA moment might be when we go to CIT, and similar with the swimming gala. But what's really strong is the use of the links here, and how those external links are so supportive to what is going on back in school as well. Okay, so thank you so much for that, Mary. Before we kind of proceed to the closing section of this evening's webinar, I'm just going to take another 60 seconds, just a pause for reflection. So if you want to just maybe jot down any thoughts that come to mind after hearing from Mary, now is a good time to do that. And finally, we're kind of going to move towards the resource section of this evening. So don't feel like you need to be frantically writing anything down, because the slides from this evening will be available after the webinar. They will be published to our website. So everything that you see here is going to be available to access after the event also. But it's always nice to leave an event like this evening's one with a couple of resources or a handful of ideas, or maybe a further action that we might take from this webinar. So the first one is, if you have listened this evening and you kind of really been inspired by our testimonies, perhaps from David or from Mary or from Alicia, and you might think, okay, well, I'm really interested in this area, but I feel like I need a little bit more support. I need a little bit more, training in this area. Cara Sport Inclusion Ireland offer a really comprehensive suite of CPD events. You can see the list there in front of you. I'm sorry that the list might be a little bit small to read, but it kind of captures how many there really are. So Lisa has put the link for Cara Sport Inclusion into the chat box, and you can access these CPD events at your own convenience. And I suppose the difficulty, I said it at the top of the webinar that some of us might be feeling a little bit zoomed out, but the beauty of Zoom is that it crosses the geographical distance that we might not otherwise do. So if you see a course that you're really interested in and really aligns with exactly what you want to do, but it's running at the other end of the country, so you might be based in County Louth and there's a course running in Tralee that's really strong and is really exactly what you want to do, you can access it from the comfort of your own home via Zoom once you have an internet connection. So there's a lot to be taken from that. So the Cara Sport Inclusion Ireland website is definitely worth a look in that space. Another useful resource when we're looking at adapting activities to different abilities is these two models, the tree model and the step model. So this will be familiar to you if you attended our CPD event in 2019, the JCT CPD event. So we would have used this graphic in that event, and you would have seen it then. So we have the two models, the tree model for adapting different activities to suit different abilities. So T for teaching style, R for rules and regulations, E for environment, and E for equipment. So that's the tree model. The STEP model is one that I actually would be more familiar with myself, and I would have used quite often in my own context, not just to meet the needs of students with SEN, but in general, in a PE class, if something just wasn't working as well as you thought it was going to, or if, I think PE teachers are really good to, adapting things and thinking on our feet, and you see it quite quickly if something's not working that you need to make a change. So we would have had in our physical education plan to use the STEP model. So S standing for space. Do I make this place bigger, smaller? Do I bring the lines in or out? If I'm doing an athletics event, is it long enough or is it too long to meet the learning intentions that I am trying to get from this particular activity? So adapting the space. Task, do I need to change the task? Okay, can I change direction, the objective, the scoring system? Maybe I need to take out the scoring system altogether. Do I need to change the speed? So changing the task can really alter the activity to suit different abilities. Equipment, so this is a really important one and a really obvious one. And I know Anya Woods, a physical education teacher, and we were chatting recently about a student that she had thought who had a diagnosis of albinism, which affected her visually. So that student could not see a white ball, but they could see a different colour ball. So for example, if there was a fluorescent pink ball used, that student was fine. So it just meant that when Anya was teaching her PE lesson with this student in it, and if she was teaching something like volleyball, she needed to make sure that she was bringing the bag of pink balls, not the bag of white balls, because if she bought the bag of white balls, that student would not be able to engage in the learning of the lesson. And it's not making the lesson, it's not creating any extra work really for the teacher. It's not changing the learning outcomes for the other student in the class, but it is just these small changes that's making it more inclusive. You might be doing it for that one student, but it's also helping everybody and certainly not hindering anybody in the class. Also, when we're speaking of equipment, it's important to note all the adapted piece of equipment. And I'm going to come back to this later before we finish this evening. So, a real game changer for me in my own context was seeing the shuttlecocks for badminton that are made of foam. So when I had my level 3 learners and my level 2 learners in the one class, we were doing badminton, I'd take down my box from the shelf of badminton equipment, and I'd have all the shuttlecocks and the rackets in it, but I also had a foam shuttlecock, which meant that it moved through the air slower, giving the students more time to get to it. And also because it was made of foam, they weren't afraid of getting hit by it because it wouldn't hurt them. So again, it's that little small adaptation in the lesson that is not taking away from the activity time or taking away from the learning from any students, but it's making the lesson so much more accessible for the students who do need that adaptation of equipment. So we'll come to the equipment piece again before this evening closes. And then lastly, in the STEP model is people. Changing the number of people that are in the activity can often change the limitations of it. So, sometimes we're so eager to get people moving and grooving and active in a PE lesson that we get everybody on at once, but we've learned over time with experience that sometimes less is more, and by having less people playing a game at one time, actually the people who are playing are more involved. So that might mean moving into smaller groups, or maybe running a league within a class so that everybody gets the opportunity to participating. So changing the numbers and player roles. And, I've seen a really strong emphasis on spike ball for this. So spike ball is, as those of you who are familiar with spike ball will know, that each player on the spike ball team has a role. And again, that's making sure everybody is included in the lesson. Mary spoke earlier about her external links with external agencies, and one of those agencies that she spoke to was this local sports partnership. So If you're already engaged with your local sports partnership, you'll know that they do provide CPD events for the people within their community. But if you're not already engaged with your local sports partnership, that's definitely a worthwhile avenue, because they're there to meet the needs of the people within that area, that community. So it's always worth checking out their website. There's some really good supports that are already in place, and I know in St. Bricken's College last year, our local sports partnership in Cavan were extremely supportive during lockdown. They would have supported us with resources for students to engage in physical activity during that time, some online events, and it was really, really useful. So I definitely recommend getting in contact with the local sports partnership, and Lisa has put the link for that into the chat just now. And this is our second last activity for the evening. So the Department of Education and Science is very interested in creating a list of resources or items that are quite useful in the context of physical education, not just generally, because that list already exists, the physical education list of items that are useful in the PE class, but specifically focused on special education. So I'm just going to ask you to maybe navigate to the Padlet if you wouldn't mind. So you can do that via the link in the chat. Thank you, Lisa. Or by clicking or by taking a photo of the QR code that you see on your screen. And we'll just go into that. So for me, I definitely would be saying something like the foam shuttlecock was just a game changer in my own experience of making sure that those students were accessing the learning in that class. So we might actually share the Padlet at this point, if that is possible, Lisa, and we'll just have a quick analysis of the feedback that has been coming through here. Yeah, balloons, short and low balance beam, yeah. Beach balls instead of volleyballs, great. Hula hoops, laminator and sheets, absolutely. There's nothing worse than creating a lovely resource and then it getting damaged. So laminator sheet, scarves, rhythmic gymnastics equipment, super. Soccer ball with a bell in it, blindfolds, ball with a bell inside, brilliant. Different coloured balls as well. Striking implements with shorter grips or handles and oversized heads or faces. This is super. Okay. Table tennis tables, they can be for SEN students, absolutely, yes, brilliant. Yeah, and we have a lot of our students in our own context in the green room who are big fans of the the rollers and balls that they use for sensory needs. So that's really rich there as well. Okay, so guys, we're just going to go back to our slides now. So feel free to keep populating that Padlet if ideas come to mind. But last but most certainly not least, as I mentioned previously, we're at a very exciting time in physical education in Ireland. So the consultation on the draft specification for our 135-hour programme in junior cycle is currently open. And that closing date is on Friday, the 5th of November. So there's 2 links that are going to come into the chat now, and there's also a piece on this in the Padlet page. So it's very important for us as professionals in physical education that when the draft specification is there for us and the consultation is open and the NCCA is inviting us to contribute that we read through it, we formulate our thoughts, and that we contribute towards it, okay? Because more than likely, most of us will be working with this specification for many years to come. So it will be a really nice opportunity to just catch it and say, okay, here are my thoughts. I've formulated them, and I know the NCC are very interested in hearing thoughts from all physical education teachers on this specification. So the links are going into the chat on that, and the closing date for it is the 5th of November. I'm going to thank you all very much for your contribution this evening. I'm particularly going to extend my very sincere thanks to Alicia Foy, David Gannon, Mary Smith for contributing to our webinar, and I think you'll agree their testimony was really, really hopeful, really enlightening, and very useful and practical for us here this evening. We look forward to seeing you all at our cluster events in January, February and March, where we hope to explore, among other things, a broader interpretation of inclusion in physical education. So obviously we had a little bit of restraints this evening in terms of the time and the amount of things that we could access, but we will have a little bit more opportunities in January to explore these a little bit further. Before we finish, if you would like, so it's 6 o'clock now, so we're bang on time for a 60-minute webinar. So if you would like to navigate one last time to the Padlet page, and just in the final column on the right-hand side, it's just a space for us to add in any resources, maybe to perhaps add comments. If you have something that you would like to ask us or contribute towards us, that is a good place to do it, and we will get back to you. And obviously as well, a couple of questions have come in on the Q&A, so we're actually not going to take the time this evening to answer them, but if there's anybody who has a question that they would like answered, feel free after the webinar finishes just to hang on, and we will, if we can't answer it this evening, we certainly will in due course. So thank you very much for your time. And thank you also to Lisa Fitzsimons for supporting the technical aspects of this evening. It is much appreciated. Here's our contact details, and we look forward to seeing you in a later CPD event.